Hello everybody, welcome back to Sports Card Connections, and as promised we're going to look at a vintage set that half of it was printed wrong, as I promised last time, and that is the 1969 Topps football set, American football, for the European collectors out there. And what you can see is these are some of the stars, just a few cards I just pulled out to set up. They're very colorful, but the problem was the first series is printed without the borders. Now the pictures were cropped and set up to have white borders, but as you can see down the sides they're ready for borders, but there are no borders. And you're left with this rather odd look. Shows up on the shoulder and head shot types real well. And Jerry Simmons, his whole left side should have been a white border. So, I don't know what happened. Topps at that time had a lot of issues with this type of a thing. The second series has the borders. You can see the Billy Kilmer card here. And there I just creamed Jimmy Johnson. That's what they should have looked like. But they didn't. So, the first series printed wrong, and I suppose by the time they caught it, it was time to release it, and they just didn't bother doing anything about it. They just went ahead with it. So the second series had the borders. The background colors are orange, yellow, pink, blue, and green. And they just vary all over the place. Now the set consisted of 263 cards, 261 player cards, and 2 checklists. But there's also, as you see in front, the minis or the stamps or the 4-on-1s, whatever you want to call them. They are cardstock. They're thick. They're not like postage stamp paper. They're not like Panini stickers. They are thick. They came 4 perforated to the size of a regular card, and you punched them out. So when you have 260 minis, what you've got is a weird situation. This is a transition year. This is the last year of the 2 leagues. The American Football League and the National Football League were merging starting in 1970. So this is the last year of 2 separate leagues. And Topps did not print the same amount of players per team. In 1968, when Topps got the license back, they had been doing just the AFL, Philadelphia gummed the NFL. They did 8 players for most teams and 9 players for a couple. A few, just big superstar teams at the time that were really big, they got 9 players. But what they did here in '69, NFL teams have 11 or 12 players. AFL teams have 7 or 8 players. Now the AFL just won the Super Bowl, the New York Jets, and yet they only had 7 players in the set. So they issued the stamp set. Now the stamp set was going to go in booklets, like this. And all of them are 10 players per team. So now you're going to have these minis or these 4-on-1s, 10 per team, but you've had some that only had 7 or 8 printed. So what do you have? You end up with, there's 25 players appearing only on cards. There's 24 players that appear only on the minis. There's also some strange anomalies in the fact that which series and how the pictures were done. If their card is a first series card, then almost all will include the same photo for the minis. And if they were a second series card, almost all of them have a different picture than the minis. So we'll get into seeing which ones. And it seems like that they were ready, the cards were released in the summer of '69. And the first series and the minis are kind of run together. There's a lot of older pictures used. So here, let's take a look. Jack Kemp, for example, is only in the minis, even though he's Buffalo's quarterback and was listed on the star players page of the album. But that's his 1967 card picture. That's Gary Collins' 1968 card. Dick Bass is a first series card, and that's his '69 first series. Bob Greasy is a second series, and that's a different photo. than appeared on the card. So you had a weird stuff going on. And some of these players, 5 of them exact, appear on no other major sets. So we have Solomon Brannon of the Bengals, picture with the Jets. Dennis Randall of the Bengals, picture with the Jets. Carl Cunningham of the Broncos. Jim Lemoyne of the Oilers, picture Bills. And Reg Carroll of the Chiefs. This is her only card. That's the only thing they're really known on are these minis. Because the AFL, what they had to do, obviously, is they had to make it up to 10 players. When they had printed 7 or 8, they had to add 2 or 3 players per team for the albums. And those particular players don't have another card. The NFL, they had to cut some players from the list. So that's why there's 25 that appear only on cards, because those players were left off of the 10-player booklet, since the NFL team had printed 11 or 12. And of course, there's an exception. The Rams have 13 players because they had a late trade of acquiring future Hall of Fame tackle Bob Brown from the Eagles, and the Eagles end up with 10 players. Instead of the 11 they were scheduled for, and the Rams were scheduled for 12. So there's all kinds of nuances in collecting the 69 set / the regular set and the minis and the booklets. So what I have, as you can see, let's pan around. There I am, fooling with things. This is an entire 69 card set. This is everybody. You see the 2 stacks over there. First series on the left, second series on the right. And that's a complete set of minis in the album. I know. I didn't keep them on their non-perfor. I took them off the sheets, okay? I didn't keep them uncut. I filled every one. So I have one set like this in the albums. I'm close on a second set individually, because I like to collect cards, not, uncut sheets and stuff. And that's the only thing for these 5 guys. If I want a card of them, well, that's what you get. So this over here, which is out of the range of the camera, anyways, that box is my single set that I'm working on. So you've got a combination of all different strange things going on, and Topps really didn't begin to check quality control a lot of ways, especially in the use of photos, until 1970, and that's across the board. In all their sports, they used a lot of old, outdated photos. So we'll take a look at that. Notice the Rams last wore that uniform in 1963. So those pictures are 6 or more years old, minimum. Similarly, the Cowboys last wore this uniform in 1963. So those are old, at least 6 years old. Erich Barnes, now, he had been with the Browns a few years, and the year before, in 1968, his card shows him with the Browns. But this is not. That is a picture with the Bears, and it happens to be his 1962 Topps card, which means the photo was taken in 1960 or 61. So that's how old it is relative to 1969. Why? I don't know why Topps would do stuff like this. I've never figured it out. They did it in all sports. A lot of fans may not know the 49ers for a while did not have their famous gold pants, white. And they also had silver. So these are older photos. Deserving a video of its own is Joe Cap. This picture appears on his 68 and 69 Topps card. It appears on like 4 of his Canadian Football League cards before he came to the sign with the Vikings. None of them are professional photos. That is a picture of him playing for the University of California in like 59. And, of course, Cal wears navy blue and yellow. What this is Topps colorizing the color of the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the CFL, green uniforms, when that real photo is a dark blue. And he played on the British Columbia Lions anyway, and the Calgary Stampeders. He did not play for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. It's just enough to pull your hair out. Cap is on this lousy picture. As you can see, it's out of focus, it's fuzzy. It's like a black and white newspaper photo or something they got a hold of, and they just kept using it and using it. Finally, in 1970, he has a nice card with the Vikings, well, until you look at it, and it's a headshot that's almost all just his face. So they did this kind of thing. Here's one of the only second series that's the same as the Mini, and that's Mike Tolliver, the Patriots quarterback. Here we go again. That's at the newest, a 1963 photo with the University of Illinois. Colored dark green because he was drafted by the New York Jets, whose color is green. And it's irrelevant anyway. The Jets never had a uniform that looked like that. But there you go. And that would mean the picture at the newest is 7 years old. He had already been with the Patriots, but where's the photo? I don't know. This is what you get. I don't want to bash Topps all the time, but I am pointing out that there's some things. Earl Morrall was the 1968 NFL Most Valuable Player. That's a picture of him with the Lions. He had already gone to the Giants and then to the Colts. So this picture is 4, 5, 6 years old. Frank Ryan, the Browns quarterback, never wore number 18. But when he was first traded to the Rams in 1962, this would have been taken in training camp before he settled on his well-known number 13. So these are some of the oddities you'll see in the set. This, in other words, this photo's 7 years old or so at the time. You also had different uniforms being worn from their card. Here's Fran Tarkenton. Now, his 1968 card shows him with the Giants, photo taken at Yankee Stadium. Here we go to 69, and they revert back to a picture of him with the Vikings. Okay, why? I don't know. So the Mini is also a different Vikings picture, because he's second series. You think they would have updated. They did not. So you get this. Maxie Bond in 68, his picture with the Rams. Here we have an old picture with the Eagles. So it's like they're going retro. As far as some of those photos, you see, here is the only first series card, Greg Larson, the Giants center, that has a different photo for the Mini. And if you can see that photo, the Giants uniform's not the shiny, richer looking blue. It's that early 60s faded. The Packers, the Giants, the Colts, they all use that kind of faded looking uniform. So this photo of Larson here is early 60s. That's the only first series card that has a different photo in the Mini albums. And for the second series, there's just a few, as I said. Marv Woodson, same photo. Otis Taylor's the same photo, but it's a reversed negative. They just flipped it. Topps did use that trick a few times with headshots. Fred Biletnikoff is the same photo. So that's it for the second series using the same photo as the Minis. In fact, they used that photo in 70. They used that photo in 70 Kellogg's as well. So that photo appears on at least 4 cards. Then we had the old one team on the card, one team in the Mini. Here's Jack Concannon, the Bears quarterback. But the Mini shows him with the Eagles before he was traded over to the Bears. So the card has the updated. Here's the reverse. Dave Costa, the Broncos. The Mini has him with the Broncos, but the card has him with the Raiders. He'd been with the Broncos since 1967. This is at least his third year. This would drive collectors nuts. And here's Hall of Famer George Blanda. The last time he would have worn this uniform was 1962 with the Oilers. The Mini card correctly had him with the Raiders. I don't know. And then finally on this line, in this area, Daryle Lamonica card updated, Mini, picture with Buffalo. He had come to the Raiders in 67. So it's kind of typical of Topps. They did this across the board. Also, you have 10 cards that form a puzzle of Fran Tarkenton. And yes, the pictures with the Vikings. So he appears on 3 things here in the set with the Giants, and all of them are photos with the Vikings. If they had just reused his 68 photo with the Giants, it would have been better than this, but I don't know. And of course, for these guys, their cards are wrecked because you got no personal information. And for Johnny Robinson, who should have an IE, not a Y, by the way, that's his only card of any kind. He's in the mini, and they just put John Robinson, but it should be Johnnnie. And also, he last played in 1967. So I think he got hurt, missed all of 68. They expected him to come back, and he didn't make it. Oh, see, half of them, they're upside down because you lay them out that way to form the puzzle. Anyway, so none of these, Hall of Famer Willie Wood, they just have the puzzle back. In 68, they did it. And what's weird as well, they did Len Dawson of the Chiefs, right here, but they showed him with the Browns. And here you have Tarkenton of the Giants, and they showed him with the Vikings. Topps did this kind of stuff all the time. Drove you nuts. There is a variation, a couple of variations that are interesting. In the minis, you have Charlie Johnson, blue panel, yellow panel, Cardinals quarterback. And he appeared on the same 4-on-1 with Bill Triplett, and you get the same variation, blue and yellow. I don't think there's a particular, difficulty to either one. They both seem to turn up rather regularly, and it's, again, classic Topps. That's a picture of him with the Giants. He had already been with the Cardinals before going to the Lions here, but you've got, again, another 5-6-year-old picture at least. And his brother Mel had been a star running back with the Giants and Vikings mid-50s to early 60s. So read up on Triplett sometime. He made a stand about racism when he was with the Cardinals. Very interesting. He did a great job, in my opinion. You do have the variations I just mentioned. Here's one of them, and that is the second series checklist. Now, on the first series, remember, we have no borders. So the second series, the first series includes, as Topps did in the time, the first series checklist card and the second series checklist to tease the upcoming second series that was, coming out. So you have this version, that's from the first series. Looks like all these that have no border. Okay. But then the second series was released, and they re-released the checklist on the second series sheet as well. And now it has a border, and they changed the football from yellow to white. I'm not too sure either one is more difficult than the other one. You tend to see this one more because the first series tend to be slightly more common than the second series if you look at what's available on eBay, but there was never real difficulty in the past. They're all readily available. So you get that variation. We do have a wrong player, so we had the aforementioned Bob Brown. Here he is with the Eagles, having been just traded to the Rams. That's why they had 13 players. You see that, where did they list it? The big tackle was traded to the Rams in a 3-man deal during the offseason. Yeah, well, that was like in May, and they were already close to production or in production. So he was already scheduled as one of the Eagles players printed. But for the mini, they had a problem. That's Bob Brown of the Packers, not Bob Brown of the Rams and formerly the Eagles. So they printed the wrong Bob Brown on the mini. This Bob Brown, a longtime starting defensive lineman for the Packers, actually didn't have his own card until 1973, Topps, 4 years later. But here he is, and why do so many players were missing? Well, because in those days they just did 10, 12, sometimes, like in this set, 7 or 8 for some teams, players per team, and you got a 45-man roster. There's lots of guys that never had a card that were, regular, everyday players, or sometimes it would be 5-6 years between cards. You got all kinds of silly stuff going on. And so it was unfortunate because my perspective is from being a historian and wanting completeness and to chronicle and keep records of the sport. And it's hard to do that when so many are missing, so you take what you can get. Anyways, Bob Brown had to wait another 4 years for a regular card, But here he is in that error, never corrected or anything for those that like that kind of stuff. There is a oddity for Jets kicker Jim Turner. Now here he is. Notice the dot. Now the dot is there, but it's exceedingly light, almost yellow. And you think, well, they just screwed up on the pass with the red ink. Oh, really? Look at the, they look at the J and T for his name. So I've never heard an adequate explanation of this. And I've got 3 of them because this one, they're even less visible. I just hang on to this card if I get it. The no dot or faded dot or yellow dot, whatever you want to call it, in my opinion, seems to be less available than the red dot. But so you have that rather odd variation. Like the Bob Brown, you had a flat-out mistake, and it was a Superstars card. Sonny Jurgensen. Okay, the problem, of course, is that's not the Redskins logo. That's the Kansas City Chiefs, which at that time had a map of the state of Missouri with a rampaging chief. But the Redskins, that's what it should have looked like. It was never corrected, so that's what you get. 2 Hall of Famers here, the great Charlie Taylor, and the Warrior profile, done by a Blackfoot artist, I believe, or else the subsequent one was, that looked very similar. Anyways, they messed up Jurgensen and never corrected it. You will notice in the 68 and 69 set, in 68 there was an expansion team. The AFL added the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, in the first year you understand that all the photos would be on their previous team because, Topps wasn't updating pictures. They, as you can tell, they printed the sets in advance. So all the 68 Bengals that are printed, there's 8 of them appear with whichever team they were selected from in the expansion. So 1969, you're hoping, okay, now we get to see the new Bengals uniforms. No. All the players appear again with whatever previous team they were on. I've never been able to dig up an explanation, but I think it might have had something to do with the merger and licensing. That's my guess, because the Bengals came in after the merger had been agreed upon, and so, I don't know. If you look at 1970, when Bengals finally appear with Bengals uniforms, you'll notice the photos are all awful, every last one of them. They look like they're close-ups taken from a team picture, where they blow it up too much and to zero in on the guy and you lose resolution, and or they're just taken by some 2-year-old who didn't know how to use a camera. All of them are fuzzy, all of them are vague, none of them look good at all, no sharp focus. And then in 1971, so now we're in the 4th year of the Bengals' existence, you have 10 players printed, and a bunch of them are on with old uniforms, and there's a few Bengals with Bengals, but now it's their white, not their black, and again, there's that fuzzy. Not till 1972 Topps do you get Bengals and Bengals uniforms that are decent photos. So it's one of those mysteries. I don't know what was behind it. I think it did have something to do with licensing, because in 1970, with the merger of the 2 leagues, and of course people noticed this throughout the 70s, Topps didn't pay the licensing fee to the now what was called NFL licensing, since the 2 leagues had merged. They probably raised the price, I can understand. Now you've got both leagues, one big unit. So no more logos. All those logos on the cards, nothing. So that means, of course, you can't use helmets unless you're the Cleveland Browns, who've never had anything on their helmet except a uniform number in the early 60s. So what do? Well, you got to use photos that don't show helmets. Okay, well, they can do that. But being Topps, they found a way to mess that up. The Chargers were the most affected because their logo is the lightning bolt. And, of course, you had it going down the pants and you had it on the shoulder along with the helmet. There's Hall of Famer Ron Mix. So that presents a problem. So the Chargers became a bunch of headshots. The Browns weren't affected at all. And then they decided to start using action pictures. So guess what? Now they've painted over helmets, and the cards started looking ridiculous. Before then, of course, they could show all logos and everything. And this continued. Topps didn't pay the licensing fee up through 1981. They didn't pay it until 1982, and lo and behold, that's the year there was a player strike, and so, they waited too long. They had trouble that year. But up to that point, all the sets in the 70s and 80 and 81, if there's a logo, an NFL logo or a team logo, it's going to be airbrushed. So holding the football, like if you can see Len Dawson here, you see that's an official American Football League logo on the ball. So if you had this kind of a picture and it said NFL like the NFL ball does, they would have airbrushed it. If you look at a 1972 Terry Bradshaw, look at the football. It's all painted over brown. Of course, all helmets were for action games, live action shots, and, there's no more cards like this because they can't show helmets, can't show logos. They only had a license with the Players Association, not with the league. So also they couldn't put the whole team. You won't see Pittsburgh Steelers like on here. You'd see just Steelers. Okay, because the copyrighted name, they didn't have a license to use. So look at all the 70 set through 81. You get this. But in 82, finally they broke down and paid it, and the glorious logos returned. They had a helmet on the front down here, and they're a nice set. I like the 82s. So in 69, you have another couple things. Here's a great guy, much beloved, Frank Buncombe. And here he is with the Chargers again, second year in a row. He had gone to the Bengals, but they show him with the Chargers. Frank Buncombe died at the end of training camp. In fact, the night before opening day of a blood aneurysm, which actually was from an untreated injury in his leg. And I've never heard anything except what a wonderful man he was. Ron Mix, who I just showed his card when they were teammates on the Chargers, said he was the greatest guy in the world. And so in an attempt to get this set signed, I know of one. There's one man I know, he has a website about AFL cards. He's tried to get every AFL card in existence signed. And he found a 69 Frank Buncombe. And it appears there would have been time for him to sign one that somebody could have mailed to the Bengals training camp. And the signature looks just like his other signatures, so it's probably good, and I was really happy to hear that. But how many could he have signed? Not too many, obviously. He was only 29 years old. Frank Buncombe was an All-American at SC and had a great career. Of course, another tragedy is Brian Piccolo. And there's books about Brian Piccolo. Gale Sayers, his teammate and roommate, the Hall of Fame runner, wrote a book called I Am Third. Wide receiver Johnny Morris, his wife, did a book about Piccolo. Piccolo died of breast cancer at the age of 26. As his wife said, nowadays they just would have done a biopsy and some surgery and Brian would have been fine, but it was 1969. What's also interesting about Piccolo, they misspelled his name on the front. They misspelled it differently on the back. They never did get it right. It's Brian. So, it's Topps. And then you also had another interesting story with Fred Hill. Fred Hill is the reason Ronald McDonald houses were started by McDonald's. His daughter came down with cancer while he was on the Eagles, and he approached the team about helping with some of the medical expenses, and they said, well, we really don't have the capacity, but let's see if we can get a sponsor. McDonald's was very interested, and the Ronald McDonald houses for, families to stay long-term while their child's being treated at a local hospital, that all came from Fred Hill's daughter, and yes, she did survive. So that's basically a coverage of the 69 football set. It's a really interesting set. It has a lot of, typical Topps stuff you dealt with at the time, old pictures, some screw-ups, some variations, but it also has a lot of really nice cards. I have a very close friend who can't stand this set. He's a designer and a graphic artist, and he just doesn't like the fact that the backgrounds are blanked out. Topps use that trick a lot. 1959 football has it. 64, 65 football, they did it. They did it in early basketball sets when they started in 69. They did it in hockey. But, you know, I prefer the full photo as well. As, you know, you collect the minis, you'll get the full photo. There's nothing blanked out here. You'll also notice one other thing. With very few exceptions, the covers of the albums have nothing to do with the team. All right, that's Joe Walton, long retired at this point, of the New York Giants, scoring a touchdown in probably 1960 or 61 or so on the 49ers book. None of the AFL teams have AFL. All the photos are either NFL or there's a few college photos mixed in. The Redskins do have a Redskins picture, but that's Dick James. He was no longer playing. He was long retired. That's an early 60s shot. The Patriots, see the AFL team, you see that looks like the Eagles and the Giants. Okay, and that none of the AFL teams show AFL. Two teams have their own, well, three, the Redskins there, but Johnny Unitas, there he is on the Colts, so that works. And Hall of Famer Bart Starr, who's in the back row, right there. There he is on the cover of the Packers. There's also some, for bizarre reasons, I have no clue. There's a couple of college, at least one or two. Here I am sifting through. I don't know what the heck that helmet is. So I'm suspecting that's a college. Somebody out there will know. The bottom almost looks like LSU, maybe. Anyways, I'd be interested. I've never really paid attention to who that is. This is running the ball as Bob Ferguson of Ohio State against Michigan. This has nothing to do with the NFL. Ferguson didn't last long in the NFL. He's in the 62 top set where they printed one rookie per team, and he was in there, but he didn't last very long. But anyways, he was a star at Ohio State. So he ends up on the Denver Broncos booklet. I don't know why. So you see the format was 4, and then 2, which are the stars, allegedly, and 4 more. So the set is very interesting. Like I said, you've got a lot of the components that made Topps up at the time. They're typical sets because you have a promo with the minis and the albums as an extra, a premium, so to speak. You have the you had 2 series. You also had old, out-of-dated photos and some other gaffes and problems. But, you know, it also included a lot of great players and some players only seen here. And it just is it's a great set to go after, and a piece of history is the last set before the merger. The Kansas City Chiefs would win the Super Bowl over the Minnesota Vikings, leaving the Super Bowl tied at 2 per each league when they merged in 1970. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.